Welcome back to the OurView Podcast. On today's episode, I welcome my guest, Jennifer Price. Jennifer is the founder and CEO of the Disability Media Network, also known as the DIME Network. This is a streaming app that offers content featuring or created by people with disabilities. Let's get into this conversation. I would like to welcome everyone back to another episode of the OurView Podcast, where we aim to educate, raise awareness, and change the tone of conversation about disabilities. I am glad to welcome my guest today, Jennifer Price. So Jennifer, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad to have you on today.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Yes. So I would like to start off the podcast as I do with all of my podcasts and ask my guest to introduce themselves. So can you tell us who Jennifer Price is?
Sure. So I am the founder and CEO of the Disability Media Network, otherwise known as the DIME Network. And by background, I'm a disability law attorney. And then I eventually created this startup company, which is a network channel or app that you can download to a Roku TV device or a Fire TV device or your Apple TV that offers content featuring or created by people with disabilities. So this is sort of my side hustle right now until it can become my main hustle. My main hustle, so to speak, is lawyering, and this is the side gig that I started last year during. Well, this is 2022 now, so I guess I technically came up with the idea during 2020 of COVID, and then it fully launched last year in 2021.
Yes, I I definitely understand. Like, oh wait, it is 2022 now, so it's it's like, what day is it? What year is it? It all
All this sheltering in, it just all starting to melt together.
the days just blend together. I say that all the time. It's I was just sharing with you and someone else who I recently recorded with that about talking about someone who was on my podcast, and I was like, oh, that was a couple months ago, and I was like, no, wait, that was maybe 9 or 10 months ago. It's like, I don't know when things happen anymore. It's just I'm just here and
Right.
getting through the day.
Exactly.
Just here getting through the day, and everything's okay. So
Yes,
but
glad to make another one.
yes. So I was so excited to get a message from you about the Disability Media Network, which I think is a fantastic idea. Can you tell us more about that and how you came up with that great idea?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I really came from being in different spaces. I do have, I don't identify as someone with a disability, but I have people in my family with disabilities. I have a cousin of mine that I grew up with who's deaf, for instance. But in terms of, the idea came from really being in more recent spaces as an attorney and being at different conventions or talking to people with disabilities about different things happening. And one that really resonated with me concerned the media. And I recently began to show an interest in media, and I would talk to different friends of mine about my interest in the media. So when I would hear frustrations about either the lack of representation or the lack of authentic representation of people in the media, I really could appreciate the value in that just as a Black woman and understanding the significance behind representation and certainly the validation that you can receive from the media. I mean, the media can, um, you know, make or break you, so to speak. They
Mhm.
can portray the positive or the negative. It's a very powerful tool. And I began to do some research, and especially research sort of what was out there, and realized that there is quite a bit of content out there, but distribution might be a problem or appears to be a problem. And then when I talked to some filmmakers, they would tell me that that was really a big problem for theirs. Maybe they would create a film and take it to a film festival, but then no deals would come from it for one reason or another. So the network was really created to offer a space, another distribution outlet to provide access. Because access to space generally is just such an important tool that many people in underrepresented communities just don't have. So the network is created to provide that access.
I think the reason for creating such a network, as you said, the representation piece is so important, so needed. Um, I recently read and shared an article on my social media platform about Lauren Spencer, and she's in the new HBO series, the Sex Lives of College Girls, I think it's called. And
Oh yeah.
she's an African American woman who uses a wheelchair because of her disability, and she was sharing very similar thoughts, which has been a conversation going on for um, months and years even, about the lack of representation and accurate representation of people with disabilities. And even more, um, Lauren's conversation was based around the African American lack of representation of disabilities.
Yeah.
And and one of the scenes, I watched the series one weekend because everybody's in the house again. So I sat over a weekend and a couple of days during the week and watched the whole first season of that show. And she is going into it's college, so they have the toga parties, or the anything but clothes party. So, they showed her wheeling in her chair, not wearing a top. So it's like, those are things that you don't see, but that is an accurate representation of college life. For those of us who went to college, there were parties that went on like that. So, to show that, and to show um, an African American female participating in college life in that way, that was, it was like, yes, like, do that, like, yes, absolutely, because that's exactly what happens. And um, so for you to create something like this, to have accurate representation of people with disabilities through, regardless of their nationality or gender or anything like that, is really uh, very, very important. Because I had Ali Stroker on my show.
Oh
um,
yeah.
yeah, I had her on my show. She was my first guest of 2021, and she's the first wheelchair user to win a Tony Award. And it's and just having a conversation with her, where thinking about the theaters in New York. I live in New Jersey, and I love to go to New York to see Broadway shows. Where I go to see a show, I use a wheelchair because of my disability, but I never saw anybody on any of the shows that I went to go see. I never saw anybody in a wheelchair until I went to see her in Oklahoma. And the way that they incorporated her disability into the show, where it didn't even seem like she had a disability. One of the scenes I always remember is um, in a movie or a show, you're used to seeing like the female sit on the male's lap when when they're being intimate or singing a song or something like that. Well, they had the guy sit on her lap in this show. And it was something so simple, but it really was just like, wow, like they really thought of that, and that's really awesome to me. And
Yeah.
they were dancing around, and in a part where the whole cast was singing a song and they were stomping their feet, she was able to go into a wheelie and bounce her chair up and down to make the same sound effect with her chair.
Nice.
So it's just thinking of those little things that to add into that show. I was blown away by the show, seeing all the, again, the little things that they did, that but made it so important to give an accurate depiction of what her life is like, being a wheelchair user, and how things can easily be modified, and to make it accommodating for her. And just the way that they redid the theater in certain parts to make a ramp onto the stage for her to get on and off the stage. And it so to see a place, to have created a place like you did with the Disability Media Network, it's very important, and I'm glad that it is happening. It's really cool. um
Yeah, I know.
mhm.
I started out by doing just some interviews on a YouTube channel, and I know one of the interviews that I did was interviewing a young lady who Morena K Onaiwu, or no, actually I think it's Morenike Giwa Onaiwu, but she co-authored a book with someone, two other ladies who are all autistic, and Morenike is African. And so I did this interview of her about what it was like, growing up with autism and being late diagnosed with autism, especially, being Black, and in family dynamics, right? Because autism is still sort of stigmatized in the Black community to some extent. And that is one interview that I still every now and then will get comments from other Black women who have autism, thanking me for the interview because they were finally glad to see another woman of color specifically speaking on the issue of autism, and what it's like growing up as a minority woman with autism, because it's just so hard to find either someone, a peer growing up in their school, or even just, maybe a speaker or whatever. So, it's just every time I get an email from YouTube saying someone has commented and it's about that one, it's usually from a Black woman. And it just reminds me as to why I'm doing this.
Yes, absolutely. It is it's one of those things where things have come a long way and there's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's, and I relate it back to back growing up in the 80s, and the Cosby Show, when they came on with the Black doctor and the wife who was a lawyer. And it's like before then you really didn't see too much of that going on in TV. And to have a family together and living in New York City and all of that, and just it's the representation matters. It always matters for sure. But I know you briefly mentioned you have some family members who have disabilities who you are close to. Would you say that having those relationships and connections with people with disabilities, would you say that that was your one of your big inspirations for creating the Disability Media Network?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that, and especially when I do think about content, it was so currently now with January, the kicking off of the new year, I put up some content that was by films by people in the deaf or hard of hearing community. And that became really important because I wanted to make sure that all voices are included, and including obviously the deaf community. So yeah, I think that I certainly can harken back to that. I know I'm originally from a military town in North Carolina, so veterans and veterans' voices are important to me, whether it's talking about having a prosthetic leg or limb, any sort of limb, or PTSD and mental health issues and mental illness. I really think about all of that, and try to be intentional about that. But some of my intentionality does go back to my own familiarity, whether it's from a family member or my hometown, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. I'm glad that that you mentioned the deaf or hard of hearing community, because it's disability is such a wide range of things. And also, like you mentioned, with the military, the veteran community of PTSD and mental health or the loss of a limb, it all is considered a disability. So it's really important that all of those things are included in a in a network like this. And I'm just really excited that you have created something like this for everybody, because I'm really big on, and I know everybody does not agree with this, but I will gladly share my story and my experience of living with a disability as many times as I can, wherever I can. And again, I know that's not for everybody to do, and that's okay. Um, but I strongly feel that we can start changing the way that people think about those who live with disabilities when we start sharing our stories and through the media sharing real and authentic stories and just changing their language about disabilities. Something as
Right.
simple as, oh, they were confined to a wheelchair. Like, no, I always tell people my wheelchair does not confine me. My wheelchair gives me a whole lot of freedom. It lets me do a whole bunch of
Right.
things.
Yeah.
It lets me go places that I wouldn't be able to go otherwise if I was walking. I do walk with leg braces and crutches, but I can't walk far. So
Sure.
so on a nice day, my wheelchair allows me to wheel around my local park for 3 miles with a friend who wants to go out for a walk without stopping too often. And not saying like, oh, okay, I can't make it, you have to go back and get my car. And so it's really it's just changing that language and letting people see again the real and authentic representation of people with disabilities is such an important thing that needs to take place, and I'm glad that you're a part of making that change.
Thank you. Yeah, language matters. It
Yes,
matters.
yes, it definitely does, and that's why um, again, I say this often on my podcast. My mission is to change the tone of conversation about disabilities, to not focus on the can't and what we're not able to do, but showing you that we, again, like I said, I like to go out and wheel around in my chair and go to the city and hang out with my friends and do all kinds of things. So I'm not just sitting in the house and sitting still. I'm very active, and it's one thing I'm glad that they changed the wheelchair symbol for the accessible parking and accessible bathrooms to make it look like the person is actually wheeling in their chair instead of just sitting there, the very stiff stick figure that they used for so many years.
Right.
'Cause I'm like, that is not me. Like, it's not a lot of people
Right.
that I know. So I'm glad. I remember when that first started changing, and I did a presentation in schools, and I would always ask them what it was. What do you think this is? And I got so many times, more often than not, it's somebody falling out of their wheelchair, and I'm like, oh.
Oh, well, that's not what I expected to hear.
Right. It's somebody that needs help. They're falling out of their wheelchair, and I'm like, oh, okay. I see it now. I didn't see it before, but leave it up to a fourth graders to figure that out.
Oh, that is now the babe.
And I had to try to tell them like, okay, so I see what you're saying now. Try to see where I'm coming from. It's a person wheeling in a wheelchair, and when they saw me using my wheelchair, my manual wheelchair, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what it is. but it but it does, it really, those types of things and language, again, that makes a big difference for the way that society views people with disabilities. So I think this is a great beginning for creating a change in the media world. So again, that's just
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that, one thing that comes out of it at a minimum is just sort of people embracing, I mean, not to say that people with disabilities don't embrace their identity, but to, you know, be just as prideful of their identities as anyone else, so I offer shows. It makes me think of the cooking show, but where someone is, cooking any other meal. Like I think he made chili one night, and there's teriyaki salmon and rice, I believe. He has cerebral palsy, but I mean, he's hungry like the rest of us, right? So he likes to cook. So he's cooking. So he created this cooking show, and so I have some of those episodes up on there. So I guess there are a lot of different themes and that I can think of that I hope people take out of it, but certainly just embracing identity is one of them.
yes, that's so true. He's hungry just like the rest of us. Like, I have to eat just like you. And
Yeah.
and it's so funny you brought up cooking. For I don't know, it was maybe for a couple of months I was doing like just a 1 minute. Instagram has the Instagram Reels, and I was
Oh,
doing
yeah.
like a 1 minute cooking video like for a couple of months, and then I just stopped doing it. So a couple of my friends more recently, they were like, "Hey, are you going to start posting those cooking videos again? Like they were really, really cool." And I'm like, "Were they? Yeah, they were great." And I'm like, "But why?" And they said, "Because like it was really cool to see that like you cook at home, like you're not just ordering food, like just you're not just ordering out all the time." And I said, "Well, I do that too, but a few times a week, I do like to cook at home. I find it relaxing and overall it's cheaper uh, to order,
Yeah.
than ordering out." So, and they said, "Yeah, it's just really cool." And what I found through posting on social media is, yes, people enjoy the information stuff that I post. I post about different disabilities, and I post my podcast where I interview different people who are have different diagnoses, but they really just like seeing me do like regular people stuff. If I'm
Yeah.
if I'm out at the beach with my friends in the summertime, or if I'm sitting at a table and having dinner with friends, they love seeing that kind of content as well. So I think that's what the cooking segments, that's what that goes back to, where it's like, yeah, but it's cool to see that you cook, because it's people may not realize that you cook. I'm like, okay, yeah. So needless to say,
Yeah.
I started doing that last week again. So
Oh, nice.
yeah. So now I'm like,
Yeah.
well, it's just me. I live by myself, so I'm like, I can't do like the multiple camera angles and all of that. Like I don't have that whole
Right.
setup and everything, but I can do the
Yeah.
short videos with the
But that
voiceovers.
right. Yeah. But that, the multiple cameras and all types of lighting and all of
Right.
that, that's like a whole production
Right.
that happens. I'm very impressed by these single people that can get it done on like a one-man team.
Right.
Um, but I don't think that the average person necessarily feels like they need that in order to appreciate what you're offering.
Right. Right. But it is, and again, it goes back to what you said about the cooking show that you have on your network. Like, yeah, everybody with disabilities, we have to eat too. So, whether we have somebody cooking food for us or we're cooking it ourselves, we do regular people things like we're
Yeah.
just it's like celebrities. They're just like us.
Right. Yes. Yes.
People with
Exactly.
disabilities, they're just like you. So it's
Yeah. And I
yeah, so
guess it
that's
could be an educational tool for people that are not disabled to, let them know that yes, they do everything that that we do, as well as being a way for people who do look like you to see you doing something, and maybe they want to know how is he making that spaghetti, or how does he cook his steak, or whatever it is
hmm
that you like to eat.
absolutely. And and again, through that, it it can be beneficial to those those companies and those chefs who make the cookware, to make them aware
Yes.
of, how can I improve this for people with disabilities? How can I make this
Yes.
better? Can this handle be a little different? Or can I, how can I improve it to make it better for more people, including those who have disabilities? Because I think a lot of times it's, uh, I won't say, or I won't say it's intentional, because I like to think people are genuinely good people. Um, but I think oftentimes we are forgotten about, and little things like cooking are not thought about. So I don't have to design this for someone who may have limited dexterity in their hands, or may have to uh, do things a little bit different. And so it's a way, an educational tool for everybody, and as you said too, a way that hopefully people with disabilities will be able to embrace their own identity of being someone with a disability, and have that pride of and being okay with having a disability. I think is very 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 cool.
If one thing comes out of it from a long-term goal perspective, I have always wanted it to be that there is a better recognition that there's a market for companies
Hmm.
to expand their product and service line, right?
Right.
So that when they are making cookware or clothing or whatever it is, there is, more thought and intention put into making sure to include people with disabilities. So I'm kind of in the proof of concept phase right now with this network, but I certainly intend to prove the market that that there is an audience base and they're being overlooked by you corporations, and they shouldn't be overlooked.
So, can you share with us where people can find the Disability Media Network, how they can add it to their TVs, and how much it costs, and any other thing like that?
Sure. Well, I'll start off by saying it's free, free to download, free to subscribe. There are no surprises where you watch one or two episodes or movies, and then all of a sudden, if you want to continue, you got to pay. I just had to deal with that. So I think that was kind of like top of mind for me. Um, so none of that. It's totally free. You can either watch online on the website www.dimenetworktv.com, and that's dime like a money,
Hmm.
dime network TV.com, or you can download the app to your Roku TV device or your Fire TV device, or if you have an Apple TV, you can download it to your Apple TV. And it's generally found in the channel store. You can search Dime or Dime Network in the channel stores of Roku TV. On a Fire TV device, you would need to go into the Find column or
Hmm.
button, but there are directions also on the website. If you kind of scroll down to where you can watch, there's a link that says how to watch, and then I provide screenshots to show you, on the different platforms if anyone's having problems.
That's great. That's so cool. I am again very excited that you have created this, and I'm looking forward to watching some things myself and sharing with family and friends, and just again just keep it up, and just just keep doing what you're doing, because it's really necessary. It's really important, and I just truly appreciate that something like this exists, and I'm glad that you were able to join me on this episode to share the great thing that you're doing.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and certainly I hope everyone goes and supports the network, and I would mention to stay tuned for, it's I guess save the date for a June release of the movie Anxiety of Laughing, which is a movie that was written by someone who is a relatively recent grad of UC Riverside. I think he graduated 3 or 4 years ago, but he wrote the script as a graduate of UC Riverside, and he has cerebral palsy. So he also plays in the movie itself as one of the main characters. And it's basically a romantic comedy where he's dating someone who does not have a disability. And so they're navigating that relationship and the future mother in law who does not approve of the relationship because of his disability. And then an incident occurs that affects the relationship, and so they then have to navigate, I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but they didn't have to navigate those dynamics of moving forward based on the new thing that's happened.
That was a fantastic summary of that movie. I can't wait to watch it. I was like, oh.
It takes you
Okay.
on a bit of an emotional journey for sure.
Yes.
You may laugh and cry and, like someone one minute and then fall in love with them the next minute because their
Right.
character will change. And so we're excited about that one. We got a little bit of help from Fujifilm in producing it, and it's our first movie production. So we're very excited to have that come out. But it won't come out until around late May, early June.
That's great. That is so great. Wow. Well, Jennifer, thank you again for taking the time to have this conversation with me. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited again. I'm very excited about what you're doing there with the Dime Network, and I look forward to seeing and sharing your content with everybody. It's really exciting and uplifting and inspiring what you're doing, just to raise awareness about disabilities and to show that there is content out there that exists that accurately represents those in the disability community, because that again is just something that is so needed, and it's necessary to share worldwide. So I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for listening to this episode of the OurView Podcast. Did you find something in the episode that you really liked? Be sure to leave us a comment on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. Make sure you're following us to see the world from our view on Instagram at OurView for Life. That's OurView, the number 4 LIFE. We thank you for listening.